He thought time had sealed that chapter forever, that first love belonged to a younger version of himself who believed promises lasted longer than circumstances. Life had moved on, hardened him in quiet ways, taught him how to survive without expecting miracles. Every morning he unlocked the same school gates, greeted the same cracked pavement and faded murals, and reminded himself that stability was its own kind of victory. He was no longer the boy who dreamed recklessly. He was a man who graded papers, fixed broken desks, and stayed late so students would not feel forgotten. Love, especially the kind that once set his heart on fire, felt like a story meant to stay in the past. Years earlier, they had met in a place filled with chalk dust and laughter, when the future still felt wide open. She had been brilliant, driven, the kind of girl who carried ambition in her eyes and kindness in her voice. They studied together, argued about books, planned lives that felt so close they could almost touch them. But life does what it always does, it interrupts. Family pressure, financial realities, and opportunities that demanded sacrifice slowly pulled them apart. When she left, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just a quiet goodbye that hurt more than any fight ever could. He watched her walk away believing that loving someone sometimes meant letting them go. Time did its work. He stayed. She disappeared into a world of universities, boardrooms, and possibilities he could only imagine. Occasionally he heard her name, always followed by words like, successful, and powerful, and he would smile politely while something tightened in his chest. He told himself he was happy where he was. Teaching mattered. These kids mattered. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the hallways emptied and the sun dipped low through classroom windows, memories crept in uninvited. The way she laughed when she was nervous. The way she believed in him before he believed in himself. On an ordinary morning that felt no different from 100 others, the school buzzed with unusual energy. Rumors spread fast in places like this. A new CEO, they said. Big changes coming. Investment, modernization, media attention. Teachers whispered with equal parts hope and fear. He listened without much interest. Change usually meant more paperwork, more expectations, and less time with students. He focused on his lesson plans, unaware that his life was already turning toward him. The assembly hall filled with staff and students. The principal's voice echoed with excitement as he introduced the school's new leadership. When she walked in, the world seemed to narrow to a single point. It was her, older, yes, more composed, carrying herself with a confidence shaped by years of hard-won success. But her eyes, he would have known them anywhere. For a brief second, she froze too. The room faded, the applause blurred, and all that existed was the weight of a shared past crashing into the present. He felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Every emotion he thought he had buried resurfaced at once. Shock, longing, disbelief, and a quiet joy he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. She spoke with ease, addressing the school with authority and warmth, outlining her vision for the future. Her voice was steady, but when their eyes met again, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, history, questions. For days, he avoided her. Not out of resentment, but fear. Fear of reopening wounds he had learned to live with. Fear that the distance between who they were and who they had become was too vast to cross. He told himself she had a world now, and he had his classroom. Those worlds did not overlap. Yet fate has a way of ignoring our careful boundaries. Their first real conversation happened by accident. A late evening, a flickering hallway light, stacks of reports under her arm. She smiled first, tentative but genuine. His name sounded different when she said it, softer, filled with memories. They talked about small things at first. The school, the students, the years that had passed. But beneath every word lay a deeper current, pulling them closer whether they wanted it or not. She told him about the sacrifices she made, the loneliness that followed success, the nights she wished she could trade boardroom victories for the simplicity they once had. He spoke about staying, about choosing purpose over ambition, about finding meaning in shaping young lives even when the world measured success differently. There was no bitterness, only honesty. And in that honesty, something began to heal. As weeks passed, they found themselves crossing paths more often. Shared meetings turned into long discussions. Professional respect blended with something personal and fragile. He saw how deeply she cared about the students, how her drive was rooted not in ego but in a desire to give others what she once lacked. She saw the quiet heroism in his constancy, the way students trusted him, the way he had become the heart of the school. The past still lingered between them, but it no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a foundation. They laughed about old dreams, acknowledged old mistakes, and forgave each other for choices that had once seemed unforgivable. Love, they realized, had never disappeared. It had simply grown up, shaped by time and experience. The school began to change too. New resources arrived, classrooms brightened, opportunities expanded, students thrived under leadership that valued both vision and compassion. Watching her lead, he felt pride, not just in her success, but in the woman she had become. And she, watching him teach, understood that success was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it lived quietly in the lives you touched every day. One evening, as the sun set behind the school building, they stood together watching students leave, laughter echoing into the street. She admitted she never expected to see him again, let alone find him exactly where he belonged. He confessed that part of him had always wondered what life would have been like if she had stayed. They smiled at the irony of it all. Life had taken them apart only to bring them back together in the most unexpected way. Their story did not end with grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It unfolded gently, with patience and understanding. Two people no longer chasing who they used to be, but choosing who they wanted to become, together. Love, they learned, does not always arrive on time. Sometimes it waits until you are ready to recognize its value. In the end, it wasn't about reclaiming the past. It was about building something new with the wisdom the past had given them. In the halls of a school that had witnessed their separate journeys, they found common ground again. And as the future opened before them, one thing was clear: some loves are not meant to fade. They are meant to return, stronger, deeper, and exactly when you least expect them. The first night after seeing her again, he barely slept. Memories replayed with ruthless clarity, moments he had locked away resurfacing as if no time had passed at all. He lay awake listening to the distant hum of traffic, wondering how a single unexpected moment could unravel years of carefully built emotional walls. By morning, he convinced himself it was shock, nothing more. People crossed paths all the time. This one just happened to hurt a little more. At school, he tried to lose himself in routine. Attendance sheets, lesson plans, the familiar rhythm of teaching helped steady him. Yet everywhere he turned, reminders followed. New notices signed with her name. Staff emails written in her unmistakable tone, direct, thoughtful, precise. Students buzzed with excitement about changes coming, unaware that for one teacher, the change had already arrived like a storm. She, meanwhile, felt the same quiet unrest. Sitting alone in her temporary office, she stared at old school photos lining the walls. This place was supposed to be just another responsibility, another achievement. Seeing him again had not been part of the plan. She had spent years convincing herself that leaving had been necessary, that love was a luxury she could not afford at the time. Yet now, the past refused to stay silent. It stood in front of her, older, steadier, and somehow even more familiar. Their second encounter came during a faculty meeting. Professional smiles, polite nods, careful distance. Others noticed nothing unusual, but beneath the table, his hands were clenched tight. Every time she spoke, he felt pulled back to late-night conversations they once shared, when dreams flowed easier than reality. When the meeting ended, she hesitated, clearly wanting to say something. He left first, telling himself distance was safer. But distance proved impossible. The school was too small, their responsibilities too intertwined. She began visiting classrooms, observing lessons, speaking with students. When she stepped into his class, the room seemed to hold its breath. He continued teaching, voice steady, refusing to look at her. The students were engaged, eager, alive with curiosity.